Hey guys, let's talk about some of the decision types that you face as an entrepreneur. I'm going to show you a matrix that helps you to realize which kind of decision you're making, which allows you to select the best thinking tool for making that decision. On the y-axis here, we have the ease of comparing different options. So if you're looking at two different kinds of apples, and it's just a matter of, do I like this kind of apple more or this one? And it's really easy to compare them because they're very similar. Then you can just say, well, this one's sweeter and I like sweet, or this one's crunchy, more crisp and crunchy, so I like that. But when it's very different sorts of things, like do you prefer this apple, or do you prefer this kind of sport, like football or soccer or something? And it's like the things that you would compare those to, it's a much more difficult question to answer, because what are we really comparing? Under those circumstances, what we're saying, if we look at this chart, is that the ease of comparing the options is very difficult, right? So it's this section down here where it's difficult to say. And under those circumstances, the thinking tool I want you to use is to get clarity about what you're solving for. In other words, what you're optimizing for, what matters the most to you, which, if you've followed some of my thinking on decision making, you'll know should come back to having that foundational step one process in place where you've decided what matters most, what's going to get you closer to what you want instead of further away from it, so that you can reduce the complexity and actually solve for the problem because you've defined what you're actually solving for. So going back to that, it comes down to what matters to you. So if it's two different employees, for example, and you're looking at these applicants trying to decide who to hire, and they have these vastly different skills, and so you can't just say, well, this person's better at communication and compared to this one, so we're going to hire them. But instead, it's like, well, this person's got coding skills and this person has marketing skills, and it's hard to compare those. You want to ask yourself, well, what am I solving for? Because under those circumstances, that's the easiest way to make that kind of decision. But what if instead it's this x-axis, and what we're looking at is the ease of gathering additional data? Now, if that's the situation where it's like, okay, we're thinking about going into this niche or pursuing this vertical, but there's these 5 other verticals we could pursue, and how do we know if this is the right one? These two look pretty good, but we're not sure which one's going to perform the best out of the gate. We're not sure which one's going to have the most upside potential or high longevity in the long run. Under those circumstances, if it's really easy to gather more data, then that's the very first thing you should do. The decision making should stop at that point, because you can just go talk to someone who can tell you what the answers are to those questions. That now makes the decision far easier. But if you're over here in the difficult aspect of that on the x-axis, then at that point, you're probably going to want to use the thinking tool that involves just diving in, getting into the arena and getting feedback by taking action quickly so that you can start gathering your own data. And there are circumstances where that doesn't apply, but that's a general rule, a general thinking process, that if it's really difficult to get the data, you're going to want to slow down on the decision, for one thing, unless, and this is where it comes to this z-axis, which is represented on my graph here in terms of shades of blue, where the degree of reversibility becomes really important. If you can't really get more data very easily, it's not a matter of doing some small tests and then quickly seeing what the result is, or asking somebody who's walked down that path further than you what the results are, and then putting that data into your decision making. If you can't do that, then it really does matter the degree to which this is a reversible decision. And this is something I've talked with you guys about before, but the simple concept is that if it's highly reversible, then you don't need to spend a lot of time figuring it out. Just dive in, get the data, because you can always switch if the data reveals that you chose the wrong path. So that's one of the questions you want to start with, actually, is this a reversible decision? And then ask yourself, is it easy to gather more data? And if the answer is yes, then gather more data. If no, then you're going to want to do a little bit more slowing down to think, and a little bit more structuring things in such a way that you're reducing the downside risk. Find ways to gather data that maintain your optionality so that you don't lock yourself in. as much as you progress, but you'll still have to go forward to get data on your own. And then the third aspect of this decision-making process is just to consider, what am I really solving for in the first place? And that's sort of a way of going back to first principles when it comes to decision-making, is to ask yourself at the root what really matters. And that often clears a lot of the fog when you're trying to make a decision. You realize it's not about gathering more data or trying to find out whether or not this is something that's long-term going to work out for you. Really, it comes down to, do we even know what we're trying to solve for? And if you can shortcut that whole decision-making process by coming back to just those three simple concepts, you'll find that a lot of the time it reduces the sense of overwhelm and complexity in decisions, and it helps you to realize what the very next logical step is going to be to help you get to a place where now you're in a position to do a decision matrix or to do a decision tree with expected values and try to make an estimated good guess about which direction to go. So your challenge this week, your micro productivity challenge, is just to take a look at my diagram and just memorize these simple concepts: degree of difficulty, ease of comparing options, and the ease of gathering data, additional data. And just use those as often as you can whenever you face a decision that seems to put you back on your heels for a moment and creates that momentary confusion. This will speed you up at making good decisions that will, of course, then ultimately lead to achieving your goals faster. Talk to you again soon.